Jamie's famous for like going back decades on his charts.
So no, this is I'm gonna start here and then I'll zoom in. But like
Okay.
this is a chart back to the 80s, and point is this is like the dominant, what I call the dominant parallels,
Right.
where the major pivots have tended to hit, or the overwhelming majority of them.
I'd love to go back to Jamie for a second and just get, Ray mentioned a couple of other markets, and I'd love to just get your
Mhm.
read on oil.
Yeah. Well, so I was already
Um,
ready. I have Aussie up and copper up.
okay, and Aussie and copper. Yeah, can we just go through a couple of those, just sort of get your read on
Yeah.
what you're thinking, what you're seeing.
Yeah. So for me, Aussie would be kind of in no man's land right now,
Mm-hmm.
but getting awfully close. So I'll go to a daily chart here. Actually, we're on a 4-hour chart. All right, here's a daily chart. Okay, so I mean, look how great this is. Look how simple this is, by the way. Connecting the lows from August 20th and December of 2021, and you nailed the low here on May 12th, right?
Right.
Okay, so we're ripping. This trend line here, which is in bold, this is back. This is like one of the most important. This is a very important trend line because it's what I call the original trend line, the original slope. It extends off of the first two pivots, in this case, the first two highs in a new, bigger downtrend. Now, I know that we ripped up through here. In fact, we went up to a trend line that was much longer term in nature. But however, look at what happens. Okay, so resist, boom, we go through it. Everyone's like, oh, damn, we broke out. We come back, we bounce off of it. Then we went back through it. My point is, it still did stuff. Like, it was still important. It still was a pivot once after you
Yeah.
broke through it and came back down. So for me, I'm looking at that trend line in conjunction with this high, which is from May 5th, which, oh, by the way, this is awfully close to the 200-day average as well. So you have a
Okay.
host of methodologies to suggest that this is an important level to pay attention to. So let's mark that like 72.65 to 73-ish over the next
Right.
couple of days. Um,
Right.
yeah. So like I'd be willing to fade it up there, right? But I'm not willing to fade it just yet, just because we are in
Understood.
the middle of nowhere. And that's
Right.
not to say that it has to go there. But if it pulls back some, at the same time, I'd be willing to buy it because we came off of big support, and you've got a well-defined level down here, about 70.50 or so, which is that former high. It's kind of
So,
congested area for
so
a week or
where
so.
would you be? Where would you be willing to buy it? What would be your level to buy?
Oh,
Level to sell would be 72.66.
yeah, 70.50. So the level that I'd be looking at would be, I mean, I have no trade to place on this at the moment. I'm just talking about it. But like this is also this line here, this is anchored volume weighted average price. Okay. You can see it's from this low,
Yep.
and it's
Yep.
and you ride it. So that's all. But yeah, right here, it's no edge for me whatsoever. Euro is
Understood.
one that I'm willing to short, and that's fine.
Okay.
Oh,
What
and finally,
about?
hold on. Let's go to copper. So we're talking about
Yeah.
copper. Copper looks like it has a little bit to go potentially as well. You can see this trend line right here, right off those lows, broke it. It was resistance. Come back to it. It would be great resistance again if if it got there. So to me,
Can I ask you?
copper's in a downtrend situation right
Yeah.
now.
Thank
Um,
you. I
yeah,
was going to say that. Like, can I ask you your long term view? To me, copper is very distributive, which is sort of
yeah,
um, a key tell that I have this thesis that we are, if not at, but very close to peak inflation, and this is one of those things that's communicating that. I think we're going to see a global slowdown, if not a recession, but perhaps a recession, but definitely a slowdown
yeah,
coming. And copper is
yeah.
is always called Dr. Copper because it's the leading indicator of global health or weakness, and I think it's showing a little bit of weakness.
Yeah, we may very well. I mean, the funny thing is the copper, really did, if you put in the first peak back in over a year ago, in
Right.
May of 2021, and then it really did nothing. And finally we put in that double top looking deal here in March, But since
Right.
then, I mean, when copper was doing this and like going to test its high from a year ago, that's when all those other commodities were going ballistic, right? So it's kind of
Right.
funny. The copper was way ahead of the rates move, right? I know a lot of people
Yeah.
look at the copper gold ratio,
Right.
and as an indicator for kind of the 10-year. Well, the copper gold ratio broke out like way in advance of the 10-year and is now, as copper's come off,
Now
I
it's
think we
rolling over.
probably, yeah, I think we
Yeah.
see rates come off and bonds bounce, right? Close that gap. So I'm kind of with you there.
This
We'll
is
see.
this is so interesting, and I hope everybody who's listening, um, like truly appreciates all of this stuff is amazingly valuable in intermarket relationships. I just have one other chart I'd love for you to just chime in
Yeah,
on, which is
sure.
oil.
Okay.
I'd love to hear your view on oil. Um,
Sure.
because honestly, oil, like I day trade stock indices all day long, and oil is literally the single most important input into on a minute by minute basis where equities are going to go these days. It's really fascinating to watch. When you put both charts on the 1 minute chart, it's amazing how you could forecast the next 10-15 minutes just by showing where oil is going. So
Okay.
on a much longer term
So,
basis, what do you think of oil?
okay. So I'm going to show you something that's kind of nuts on a very long-term basis. Uh, so here is a chart.
Jamie's famous for like going back decades on his charts. So
So no, this is I'm gonna start here and then I'll zoom in. But like
okay,
this is a chart back to the 80s. And point is this is like the dominant what I call the dominant parallels,
right,
where the major pivots have tended to hit the overwhelming majority of them. And you can see if you just follow around some of the big turns and what I call behavior changes and all this and that. But
right.
the week of early March, that was when we actually
The
topped so
131
far.
spike, yeah, yeah.
Right. And so that parallels on the same one as the Gulf War, which was in October of 1990. I just thought that was kind of
Wow,
wild. So thought I'd point it out. Now let's
that is
move
cool.
on to like near term, if you will. I will go to, okay.
We had this is a pretty ugly candle today, actually. I thought it
Yeah,
was,
absolutely. No, absolutely. And this does look to me, just the way this looks from like if we were to say even like an
yeah,
Elliott perspective, right? I mean, you have kind of really sharp down, and then you've got all this consolidation. It's really choppy and overlapping. So
right.
this to me looks like one that might be worth kind of, I don't know, look at the short side. I don't know if the setup is necessarily there yet.
Right.
However, you probably want to see a break of something, right? But if you just look at this from this, I mean, it's very kind of wedge like, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
The price action today, just on a micro level, when I was
yeah,
watching it, so we were live trading. What happened was we had this huge spike through the 1900s, through the 20, actually all the way up to 21. But within 5 minutes, it retraced almost all of it, and then it spent the rest of the day just selling off, which is kind of interesting. I
yeah,
mean, obviously, oil is probably the most difficult in many ways because it is every day is like a geopolitical risk to the whole thing. But it feels like there's just satiation of like we're hitting levels here where the global market is saying yours. You want to price your 120. I'll pump it out as much as I can at this point. It's kind of interesting. So yeah, that's super interesting. Thank you, James. That was really interesting about all those pivot points. It is starting to show some weakness.